Have you ever smiled through a family dinner while quietly rehearsing an exit? Have you ever hung up the phone and felt your whole body finally exhale, only to feel guilty for the relief? Have you ever been told you're ungrateful for walking away from the people who raised you? Have you ever loved someone and needed to leave them at the very same time? Have you ever rehearsed what you'd say if someone finally asked why you left and never gotten the chance to say it? Most people assume walking away from family happens in one dramatic moment, a blow-up, a betrayal, a single unforgivable thing. But the truth is, by the time someone actually walks away, they've usually been disappearing slowly for years, long before anyone else noticed. The ending gets all the attention, the years leading up to it get none. And that's exactly why it looks so sudden from the outside and so obvious from the inside. Today we're going to break down the real psychology of people who walk away from family, why it happens, what's actually happening underneath it, and how the people living it can stop carrying so much guilt for choosing themselves. Welcome back to Psychology Sounds. Tell us in the comment section how this resonates with you. Like the video and subscribe to support us. To understand why someone walks away, you have to let go of the idea that it's sudden. Think of it less like an explosion and more like a volcano. Pressure builds quietly underground for years, completely invisible from the surface. Birthdays still happen, photos still get taken, everyone still smiles for them, but underneath something is building that no single event caused. Psychologists sometimes call this accumulation of small repeated hurts microtrauma. The criticism disguise it as concern, the boundary pushed a little further every year, the feeling that you have to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. None of these moments look serious enough on their own to justify leaving, but stacked over a decade, they become a nervous system that's permanently braced, tensing before the phone even rings, rehearsing conversations before they happen, bracing for a tone of voice before a single word is spoken. Even good days get filtered through that bracing because relief in that kind of household never lasts long enough to feel safe. And eventually, the pressure doesn't need a big trigger. It just needs one more drop before someone finally walks. So what does that pressure actually look like from the inside, in the years before someone leaves? Let's break down the signs. Sign 1. They were given a role instead of an identity. In families where this pressure builds, children rarely get to just exist. They get cast. There's the golden child, praised and protected, whose real job is to make the family look good, even if it means sacrificing who they actually are. There's the scapegoat, blamed for tension they didn't create, often because they're the one person willing to name what everyone else pretends not to see. There's the invisible child, who survives by needing as little as possible, becoming so skilled at self-reliance that they grow up unsure if they're even allowed to take up space. And there's the parentified child, who becomes the emotional caretaker for their own parent, the mediator, the peacekeeper, carrying weight no child should ever have to carry. A child assigned any of these roles learns their value early, and it's rarely tied to who they actually are. None of these roles let a person develop an actual self. And when someone finally tries to step out of the role they were assigned, walking toward who they actually are, the family often doesn't celebrate their growth, it resists it, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. Because in a system built on roles, becoming a whole person can look like a threat. This pattern rarely stays confined to one relationship either. People who grew up cast into a role often find themselves repeating it elsewhere, at work, in friendships, in romantic relationships, without ever realizing they're still auditioning for a part they never agreed to play. Sign 2, they kept hoping instead of accepting. This is the part outsiders understand the least. If it was really that bad, why did they stay so long before walking away? The answer is something psychologists call trauma bonding. When moments of harm are mixed with occasional moments of warmth, a cutting comment followed by a rare apology, a cold silence followed by unexpected kindness, the nervous system learns to confuse inconsistency with love. It creates a cycle of hope. Maybe if I try harder, stay calmer, give more, I'll finally get the parent I always needed. That hope isn't foolish. It's deeply human. And it's often the same hope that kept them showing up year after year, gift after gift, apology after apology, that was never actually theirs to give. But it keeps people returning again and again to a well that was never going to fill, mistaking their own effort for the other person's capacity to change. mistaking a rare good day for proof that things could finally be different. Sign 3. They grieve someone who's still alive long before they ever walk away. This is one of the loneliest parts of this whole process, and almost no one talks about it. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss, a grief with no funeral, no clear ending, no ritual to mark it. The person is still out there, still posting holiday photos, still technically reachable, but emotionally they're gone, or maybe they were never fully there to begin with. What makes this grief so heavy is that it's often layered. You're not only grieving the relationship you're about to lose, you're grieving the one you never actually had. The parent who might have listened. The version of childhood you needed but didn't get. The birthday call that should have felt easy instead of like a performance. Letting go of an imagined parent can feel like losing them twice. It's worth saying plainly here that this kind of grief doesn't resolve the way other grief does. There's no anniversary that marks it, no clear before and after. It simply becomes something a person learns to carry alongside everything else, quietly, without much language for it. Sign 4. Walking away becomes the only form of self-protection left. When people hear walking away, or no contact, they often assume it means anger or revenge. In reality, it's rarely about punishment. Some people start smaller, shorter visits, safer topics, a way of saying I still care but I can't give you unlimited access to my inner life anymore. Others go quiet and neutral, unreactive, because reacting is exactly what used to fuel the conflict, and giving nothing to react to is its own quiet form of protection. And for some, after every smaller boundary gets ignored, walking away completely becomes the last tool left, not out of hatred, but because it's the only option that hasn't already failed. Here's where it gets painful. From the outside, none of this looks reasonable. Family is supposed to be unconditional, so walking away gets read as selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. And that judgment lands on people who are already carrying grief, guilt, and relief all at once. They mourn the parent they hoped for. They feel guilty for wanting peace. And underneath both of those, quietly, they feel something they are almost never allowed to admit out loud. Relief. The chaos has stopped. The nervous system finally gets to exhale, sometimes for the first time in years. But relief, this hard one, rarely arrives without shame attached to it, as if choosing your own well-being makes you disloyal to the people who raised you, as if peace itself had to be earned through guilt before it could be kept. Holidays become their own particular ache, an empty chair, a quieter house, everyone else wrapped in a warmth that feels just out of reach. So what can someone who's walked away, or is thinking about it, actually do? Principle 1. Let the pressure be the real cause, not the last argument. The final blow-up, the holiday comment, whatever moment finally made them walk, was never really about that one moment. Naming the years underneath it, instead of getting stuck defending the small thing that triggered the break, is how the guilt starts to loosen. Principle 2. Protect the boundary without needing it understood. Waiting for a family member to finally agree that walking away was justified is waiting for something that may never come. A boundary doesn't need permission to be valid. It only needs to be consistently kept, even when the people on the other side of it insist it isn't fair. Principle 3. Let two truths sit side by side. You can grieve what you lost and still feel relief that it's over. You can love who someone could have been and still accept who they actually are. Healing here isn't about picking one feeling and forcing the other one out. It's learning to hold both without needing them to resolve into something simpler. There's one more piece worth naming before we recap, because it's the part that often gets left out. Reclaiming an identity that was buried under years of roles and survival strategies isn't a single decision. It's a slow rebuilding, learning to ask questions that were never allowed before. What do I actually want? What feels safe to me? Whose voice is this reaction really coming from? Mine, or the one I grew up trying to please? And somewhere in that rebuilding, many people who've walked away discover something unexpected, a family of choice. Not blood, not obligation, but people who show up consistently, who listen without an agenda, who make safety feel ordinary instead of rare. That doesn't erase what was lost, but it does prove that the capacity for real connection was never actually broken. It was just waiting for people capable of meeting it. So, to recap, Walking away from family isn't a sudden decision, it's the release of pressure that built quietly for years. It comes from being cast into a role instead of allowed an identity, from hoping instead of accepting, from grieving someone who's still alive, and from running out of any option except distance. The way through isn't forcing the guilt away, it's naming the real cause, protecting the boundary without needing approval, and letting grief and relief exist at the same time. If you've ever walked away from family and been called ungrateful for it, hear this. Choosing peace over chaos was never a betrayal. It was the moment you stopped inheriting pain that was never yours to carry in the first place. It was the moment you decided that being loved conditionally wasn't the same as being loved at all. If this touched something in you, let me know in the comments which part felt closest to your own story. And if you know someone quietly carrying this kind of guilt, share it with them. It might be exactly the understanding they've needed and never had a name for. Psychology Sound says, thanks for watching. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you next time.